Aum Sairam. Hara Hara Shankara, Jaya Jaya Shankara. Episode 50. Shri Mahaswami, the sage with eyes of light. The diary of a seeker of truth, Dr.Serge Demetrian. Dear devotees, now we shall listen to the second section, part 3 of this divine book under the subtitle Around the River Arani. Vaitacodium Vedu, Monday and Tuesday, 6th and 7th December 1971. The darshan over the wall and the normal state. After a stay of a few days in Kanchipuram, where I recovered some of my energy, I returned to Vaitacodium Vedu by 1 p.m. and found Sri Mahaswami in the same bhajan mandapa. He had just returned from the river and slowly entered the narrow yard surrounded by a short wall not more than 75 centimeters high. I was inside the compound. After a few minutes, I came nearer. At exactly the same moment, Sri Mahaswami, who was seated on a stone under the pretext that he had to wash himself, directed towards me one after another, both of his feet that seemed to me as cast in matte gold mixed with pearl powder. After this introductory darshan, I withdrew in order to take some rest on the veranda of a neighboring house where I had kept my travel bag. Towards 4:30 p.m., after 1 hour and a half of silent repetition of sacred names, I went again to the bhajan hall. I was obliged to remain outside of the yard on the eastern side, that is, on the right side of Swamiji. I stood in petrified shock with hands in Anjali, so much was I surprised to find him on the veranda of the building, sitting so that I could see him the moment I arrived. He had just started a more elaborated puja. Between him and me, beyond the short wall, there stretched at some 5 meters the empty yard. During the service, there was at least one person who mounted guard and stopped the visitors from coming between him and me. Thus, the alley was permanently kept clear. He started with the great invocations. Standing exactly in front of him, the eyelids closed, I was looking mostly inside me. During the small intervals when I opened them, I searched for his eyes, his hands, or his feet. It soon became evident that I was involved in what happened. I felt the movements of Sri Mahaswami cutting across me as his hands were extended with some sort of slender fingers made of an invisible but sensible force that swept the area in front of him up to me and around me. What happened in this one is almost indescribable. Sri Mahaswami came from his veranda and removed from my chest the Purusha, a mental fact. We agree, but a fact all the same, and for the one who experienced it, it was indubitable. He took it out as if it were an ornament from a shelf. It was a little Shivalinga in rock crystal of no more than 5 centimeters high. Sri Mahaswami returned on the veranda of the bhajan hall, holding it on his heart as if to protect it, and placed it on a wooden plate in front of him. He performed a number of movements in order to purify this Purusha. When he poured the waters gathered from I do not know what holy sources, I felt that he was bathing me with a liquid that passed through me as if I were a colander. The invisible body was standing empty out of the yard near the wall, like a faint structure of colored ashes ready to crumble at any moment. As a well advised stage manager, Sri Mahaswami directed the coming of the great friends. He kept them in his presence as much as he wanted. He decided who left and who came. Everything happened in my name, and I was reduced to a minute I feeling. I had become the character of a puppet show. From time to time, I opened the eyes and tried to stare at him, but it was he only, Swamiji, who put in motion everything that existed. The real I was on the wooden tray in polished brown wood in a bath of blessed water where floated colored petals, blades of grass, grains of rice, and kumkum. My body observed the visitors who came between Sri Mahaswami and me, who was left on the other side of the wall adjacent to the alley which the guards kept free. However, this body, along with the strings that made it move, that guided the eyes, and which gave rhythm to the breath, ample or superficial, was foreign to me. It seemed to be a kind of a bag full of compressed powder, nothing else. However, in the interior realm, the meditation developed according to the general scheme of the great days or the great nights in the presence of Sri Mahaswami. The capacity of seeing had withdrawn behind the eyes. I had lost the sight, but the eyes were still seeing as if someone else saw through them. As the ancient I had perished, this someone did everything. The light of the eyes, having left the physical eyes, was concentrated on the median vertical axis of the body. Here appeared another type of scintillation, like a sword, which stood straight in front of the spine. These two lights united between the eyebrows. At this instant, a general explosion took place that put fire to everything, starting with the head. Following the example of other major experiences, with Sri Mahaswami, the development of the paths of light should have been rather slow, with the great friends' arrival and purification, each in their own manner. But this time, everything happened very easily. My concentration was on the brilliant eye of Shiva, the way it appears on the main Shivalinga of the Ekamranatheshwara temple in Kanchipuram. At a certain moment, I thought that the inevitable lightning bursts that shot out would swallow me up and would destroy me with their ardor. For some seconds, I heard Sri Mahaswami utter a few words. I did not understand anything, though I felt being very near to him, despite the some 5 meters that physically separated us. I know only that he had a low voice like a deep and penetrating whisper. It acted on all the senses at the same time as it woke up both the palpable feeling of a scented wind and the visual image of burnished gold. Suddenly, an important obstacle appeared. Thoughts from some forgotten corner arose and tried to bring back the old I feeling, this time touched by vanity of the type it is me that acts. Nevertheless, Sri Mahaswami was on the watch. He hailed the great friends. He orchestrated a row of signs in the space. He ordered the physical eyes to swing from his own eyes to his foot. He sprinkled my real eye with water there on the wooden tray where I laid quietly under the form of a Spatikalinga. Straightway, the eye of Shiva, located between my eyebrows, reappeared, and the rest of the eye was projected towards this eye, becoming in a moment one with its nature, which was the same as the lightning from the eyes of the great goddess. As regards the body, my old body that had become a loose form of colored ashes floated a little just over the ground and was sustained by an inexplicable force. It became totally inhabited by a luminous reality that could have seen Sri Mahaswami or Shiva or the great goddess. A single thought seemed to predominate, that of renunciation of some temptation of sexual nature, the last obstacle thrown in despair by the forces that were to be vanquished. When this last obstruction was annihilated, the entity Sri Mahaswami, Shiva, the goddess, parted for an instant from the form made of ashes and left it surrounded by a luminous vapor of imprecise limits. Was it the total relinquishment of the body? Not yet. The form of ashes was ordered to open its eyes. It saw Swamiji getting slowly up. He gripped his danda and drew some signs over the large plate where I was still lying in my real form of a small Shivalinga of rock crystal. Then Sri Mahaswami briskly stood up and advanced with the danda leaning forward as both a defense and an assault weapon towards the statue of ashes that waited, entirely encircled by the luminous vapor. Under the pretext that he wanted to adore the sun that was setting on the left end at the back of the bhajan hall, he came near to the low wall and to the said colored form. He stopped at its right side, 1 meter from the diaphanous eye. In fact, he introduced himself into the vapor that inhabited and jutted out of the ash statue. His entry was preceded and helped by a series of gestures performed with the danda round the mentioned statue. The little flag, the piece of orange cloth tied up like a hatchet at the upper end of his danda, came very near to my head, which with the rest of my receptive capacities could feel the air current produced by its movements. From the danda there shot out a bluish light serpent that cut through the head of ashes and the glowing vapor. At the appropriate moment, Sri Mahaswami himself jumped into the ashes come luminous vapor body in that very instant when in the interior the vapor of bluish air reached its maximum concentration, and when the lightning from the immensely large eyes of the goddess had become densest. The final perceivable image was a gigantic Chandramaulishvara, always with the threefold golden leaf on his head, which continuously increased in a vertical whirl of golden ethereal light. There was no more left, as in previous instances, something that could be named I, a place where Chandramaulishvara could have appeared or been created. But it was exactly the opposite. Chandramaulishvara existed alone, an immensity, an ocean. The ocean, as a second, did not exist, of molten gold, with this something dubbed as I, a minute stick, a match also made of gold, floating somewhere at the whim of the waves of liquid gold. The breath, which had become more and more thread-like, had long since stopped without any care of death, as there was nothing left that had fear or was feared. There was nobody there to feel anything. Then everything perished, image, witness, world. The eyes then opened by themselves and they saw Swamiji, who all the time stood near me on the right side at hardly 1 meter on the other side of the short wall. I would have liked to salute him full of gratitude, but it was impossible. The ashes coffin refused to move. The eyes saw Sri Mahaswami going back to the veranda where he turned eastwards, that is, towards the so-called I on this side of the wall, and towards the plate where the little Shivalinga in rock crystal, my true soul, quietly waited. Sri Mahaswami bent in spirit, took in his right hand the tiny object, came near, always in spirit, and put back the rock crystal Shivalinga in my chest as one replaces on a shelf the ornament one had just dusted. He drew a few circles with his danda round the head of the ashen statue. Then only the statue returned to life. The blood, which had stopped moving, perhaps the heart had ceased to beat, started again its flow. The breath, coming from far, reappeared. The sensitivity of the limbs, which had disappeared, came back. The body, which was as if hanging in space, got back its weight and rested once again on earth. It became possible to move the head, the hands. The feeling of being frozen, locked in an ashen coffin, diminished, then subsided. Likewise, there perished the feeling that I was carried by someone, that I was held or hung over the earth. As by an order, the visitors, who strictly kept all the time a large open alley between the veranda and me, started to seep in without anybody intervening. I understood the marvelous experience had finished. After 5 minutes of human time, I was able to walk by looking attentively where I put my feet. After 3 rounds of the Bhajan Mantapa's yard, I headed slowly towards the river at some 100 meters distance, so as to avoid meeting the curious that could oblige me to speak through signs, as the voice had not yet come back. I observed that I was not suffering any headache, nor had I the feeling of having exerted myself. I was without joy, enthusiasm, or mental upheaval. Also missing was even the regret of being compelled to return to ordinary life. I had been in my normal state. The ordinary state or the habitual one of our existence is abnormal as it is illusory. It was to be replaced entirely by the normal state, and this process of replacement had to be progressive but continuous without hesitation. Devotees, we shall continue to listen to Around the River Arani in the coming episode, bowing at the holy feet of the Gurus. Aum Sairam. Hara Hara Shankara, Jaya Jaya Shankara.